Hello, everyone. Welcome to another episode of the podcast. I'm your host, Shakul, and I'm joined by Rebecca Stonor from Just Eat Plants. Welcome to the show.
Thank you. Thank you for having me. It's nice to be here.
Rebecca has an incredible story. She has overcome multiple sclerosis and she was diagnosed 7 years ago. So she's been able to achieve remission and maintain a good level of health for some years now. And I'm really interested in hearing your story, Rebecca. How did this all start for you? What did you kind of get told by your medical team? And then what made you think, okay, well, there may be a different option here for me, and what made you decide to take that?
Yeah, sure. So, nearly 7 years ago, I had a couple of kids. So my youngest was about 2, I think, at the time. So, I was pretty sleep deprived. I felt awful. The usual stuff that you have when you've got a little toddler who doesn't sleep. And I didn't have time to exercise, and I ate whatever I liked. And I felt really, really unwell. So I always felt like I was coming down with a cold. That's sort of like, something in the background's just not right. And then one day I noticed my vision was really impaired. One of my eyes, I remember going to work, so I was working part-time, and I looked at the person I was sharing an office with. I thought, wow, there's something wrong with their eye. Like one of their pupils looked really grey. And then I looked at another person I was working with, thought something wrong with their eye, and then finally worked out it was something wrong with one of my eyes. So every time I tried to make eye contact with someone, it looked a bit weird. So it started to get a little bit worse, and I got worried about it. Obviously something with your eyes is a bit of an issue. I had a whole lot of other things going on too, like my fingertips felt really weird, doing up buttons, tiny little buttons on children's clothing. I just was really struggling. I felt like I had the dexterity of my toddler, I couldn't do the things I normally would do. Cognitively, I couldn't function, like my brain was just scrambled. So anyway, I went to general doctor, and he said, okay, there's something wrong with your eyes, go to emergency straight away. So that sort of rang alarm bells. Took myself up to emergency, and they had no idea. So they basically said, I'll come back in a few days' time and see our special ophthalmologist. So I did that. They did a few tests. They didn't really tell me what they thought it would be, but they did this color test. So they brought like a red piece of paper in front of my eye, and basically it looked grey. And my vision was getting quite a lot worse. And eventually they said, okay, we'll send you off to a referral to a neurological ophthalmologist, so somebody had more idea of the brain. So in the meantime, I did the Dr. Google, which I don't recommend to anyone, of course. But I came across a website that's, if you have vision problems, do you have this? Choose A. Do you have, these symptoms? Choose B. Anyway, I kind of worked out that I had optical neuritis, which was a symptom of multiple sclerosis. So I was really freaked out. I rang the next specialist I was meant to see to say, I think I should see you really soon, rather than I think it was 6 weeks' time. So I got in, went off for MRI, and I remember sitting in her office. She was a lovely woman, really, really smart. And she said to me, it looks like you have multiple sclerosis. And I think saying looks like trying to soften the blow a little bit. But it was horrible. I didn't cry. I'd kind of already prepared myself, and I just said to her, what can I do? Is there anything I can do? And she said, well, there's these amazing medications available these days. There's something that you can do that basically it's like a chemotherapy, can wipe out your adult immune system, and you can almost get rid of it. And I was like, wow, great, there's things that can be done. But I felt awful. My symptoms were just horrible. The cognitive impairment, it's really hard to describe. And I felt like my balance was off when I was walking, but the vision was particularly scary. So I went back to the internet. So I guess I should rewind a little bit. I have a background in science. So I worked as a plant scientist for nearly 20 years. And I had that sort of ability to do a bit of research. So, rather than just Dr. Google, I went back to the publications and sort of did a bit of research on MS because I wanted to find out if there was something I could possibly do to I just had all these images of myself going to school with the kids in a wheelchair and, being fully dependent on my husband for showering and toileting and all of that sort of stuff.
Mm-hmm.
So, yeah, it was pretty, that the moment was completely earth-shattering. Like, unless you have a diagnosis like that, it's really, really hard to explain how you feel in that moment. But so my other, I guess one of the reasons I felt so much sense of dread was that I had an aunt who has multiple sclerosis. She's still alive today. She's in her 70s. She has no functionality left. Basically, she can speak and she can swallow, and that's it. So she's living in a quadriplegic unit under full-time care. She progressed very, very quickly. She was in a wheelchair in her 30s. And so the outcome for her is that she's fully reliant on other people. She now has diabetes and she's obese. So, it's the conditions that she's living in, and it's just not fantastic. So I just thought, what's the next step? People, end up on life support with MS, or they get pneumonia and they die. So, I was like, what can I do? So I, went to the science, and I found very quickly that MS is very much a lifestyle disease. So it's kind of referred to as the heart disease of the brain, I was only 40 when I was diagnosed, so I was pretty shocked to have such a massive diagnosis at a fairly young age. My neurologist wasn't supportive, so when I eventually found a neurologist, I went and saw him. He, I said, I've been reading this science that potentially I could reverse these symptoms and I could live a healthy life. And he said, well, there's no evidence to, show that. He prescribed a medication, which I've now found out he prescribes to all of his MS patients. So there might be a little incentive for him to do that. And he wasn't a particularly healthy looking person himself. And I thought, well, I'm taking advice from someone who doesn't live, a healthy life. I found very quickly that diet and lifestyle had a role in not only the development, but the progression of multiple sclerosis as well. So
yeah, I'd like you to dig in a little bit deeper into what you found, because I'm glad you mentioned that, because I was going to talk about your science background and the fact that you have a research background. You understand how to read a study, and what were some of the things that you found that were coming up in the scientific research that you were reading?
Yeah, so I first found there was some information from somebody who was sort of touting a paleo diet. I didn't know anything. So basically, before I was diagnosed with MS, I ate a standard Australian diet. So I thought, trying to restrict my carbohydrates because that will put on weight. I was always probably, I would say, 7-8 more kilos overweight. I was a chubby kid. I was actually looking through pictures of myself as a kid, and I think I started being quite overweight at the age of like 3 or 4. And people have said, oh, it's puppy fat, but I had that ability to put on weight quite early on. So, as an adult, I always carried a bit more weight than I probably should. So standard Australian diet, lean chicken breast. I ate vegetables and probably a bit of fruit, but nothing like I do now. I thought I ate really well. I always was very conscious of exercising and all that sort of stuff, but kind of what
everyone's told to do, right? Just eat the
Yeah.
balanced diet, do your exercise, and then don't think about anything specific. Just and get your protein, kind of thing.
Yeah. And I know that some of the other factors that can contribute to developing MS are low vitamin D. So my vitamin D levels were rock bottom. I was inside with a baby. My work was inside mostly. So really, really low. And because I have the kind of skin that I can develop skin cancers, I'm, covered up all the time. So very low in vitamin D, didn't exercise, really poor sleep. I wasn't a smoker. Smoking is a really big risk factor for MS, but I was around people who smoked pretty much all my life. I think probably since I was a baby. So,
Right.
that passive smoke maybe would have contributed as well. So,
Mm.
all those things, perfect storm. And that's, what led to my diagnosis. So in terms of the science, I first found the paleo approach and it didn't sit well with me. So when I was first diagnosed, I had a nurse from the MS Society come and visit me. And I thought, wow, this is serious, having someone actually come to your home, that they could afford to have a nurse, to be sent to you. So she had a stack of papers that was basically, this medication will reduce your relapse rate by 30%. This one will reduce it by 60%. And none of them were 100%. And I'm like, well, I want a better outcome than this. The statistics weren't good enough for me. But one thing she did mention, although she was very obese and she could barely walk down my driveway, she did mention to me that saturated fat had an implication for people with MS. So that somehow stuck in my brain. Then I did this research. I found the paleo approach. I'm like, there's too much meat. It's just too heavy in meat. But the one thing I did like about that approach was that it focused a lot on having a huge amount of colourful fruits and vegetables. So like 8 cups of densely coloured vegetables a day. And you're like, when you stuff your stomach with that much vegetable material, there's not much room for anything else. And only the darkest coloured fruits and things. So, lots of berries. So that element was quite good, and cutting out dairy. And so I started that for maybe a month or two. Then I joined a few forums on the internet trying to find out more information. And somebody in one of the South Australian MS forums said, just a slight comment, have you heard of Overcoming MS? And I was like, no, I haven't. So I quickly found that. So that was a program developed by an Australian medical doctor who had MS himself. So he went into the research, he wrote a book, developed a program called Overcoming MS. His name's George Jelinek, and I got onto that straight away. So from diagnosis to when I started OMS was a very short time, like a matter of weeks. So Overcoming MS is a full program. It's not just a diet. It covers getting vitamin D, getting sleep, exercise, meditation and mindfulness for, reducing stress. Medication if needed. It doesn't say don't take medication. But the diet is the main component. So it's a low saturated fat diet. So it's not low in fat, but low in saturated fats. It does include seafood, egg whites, and olive oil. So I probably started out on that. And then I just thought, I never really liked seafood. What if I drop that out? How will I feel? And I have some chickens. I still have them. They're in the garden now, and they're our pets now. It's like, well, what if I stop eating eggs? Will I be okay? And I had all these doubts about, basically changing my diet into a completely whole food plant-based diet.
Yeah, because there's a fair bit of saturated fat in seafood and in eggs.
And when you're eating things like salmon, because people said, salmon's so high in omega-3s. Omega-3s are really important for the brain. It's been shown to reduce relapse rates in people with MS. Not particularly salmon, but having high levels of omega-3. So I was like, get as much salmon as I can, but very high in fat. So I restricted all that stuff, got all that out, and just focused on a whole food plant-based diet without added oils. So, and all the science backed it up. There's a lot of evidence to show that, fat affects the brain in different ways, and also you're also preventing other chronic illnesses like diabetes and heart disease and all that sort of stuff. Because that was one of the things that literally went through my mind in the office when this woman diagnosed me was, I'm only 40. I've been diagnosed with this. What if I get cancer on top of this? What if I get, diabetes, all these other things? So, found out pretty soon that it was beneficial for a whole lot of things. So,
the plant-based diet. Yeah. So, sorry, just to clarify, when did you go from the Overcoming MS diet to getting rid of the seafood and the eggs and the added oils? What made you make? Was it just you thought that was okay, or did you actually get some information on the whole food plant-based diet and thought, okay, that makes sense?
Yeah, just kept going down the research rabbit hole. I came across the experts McDougall. So one of the original studies into MS and diet was by Roy Swank. And he, had a fantastic study that showed that he followed, I think it was 144 people over like 35 years.
Right.
Those who ate very low saturated fat diet did exceptionally well. By the end of the study, they were all still alive. They were fit and healthy. He described them as having youthful skin and all these kind of things. Like they were physically very active. The other group who only ate a little bit more saturated fat. So it wasn't a huge amount more, but it was basically like a tipping point. They got to this point where that's too much for people with multiple sclerosis. They, I think it was 80% of them were dead by the end of the study and of multiple sclerosis causes. So yeah, it was pretty amazing research. So that was very compelling. And I know McDougall looked into it a little bit as well. He did a study with some participants. I don't think it showed as clear evidence, but it was over a shorter period of time. So the Overcoming MS program talks about, I think, you spend your whole lifetime developing this disease, but it can take 3 to 5 years for people to stabilize on the diet. So I followed OMS with seafood and egg whites and olive oil for maybe 3 or 4 months before I dropped it out. I started to find all this other information and I dropped that out. And then I think so in terms of my reversal of my symptoms, my optic neuritis definitely faded. It didn't like disappear one day. My eyesight just became better over maybe 6 months. But a lot of the other symptoms like cognitive function, dexterity in my fingers, the balance issues, all of that sort of stuff, I think that was quite quick within a few months. So I did take medication in the beginning. I was on like an oral medication. But one of the side effects, there's always side effects to these medications, and they actually didn't know how it worked. It was just some, chemical that went into the body that locked up your white blood cells in your lymph nodes. So instead of my white blood cells attacking my brain and spinal cord, which is what MS is, they were sort of trapped away. So the main side effect of what that was, you could get this thing called PML, where basically your brain swells and you die or become a vegetable. And it's like, do I really want to risk that? Do I want to stay on this? And one of the other things with some of these medications is because it's trapped up your lymph nodes for so long, when you go off the medication, they can flush through your body and cause a relapse. So that was really scary coming off of it. I decided that I would wean myself off very slowly. The neurologist did not support me at all. Although I was, eating well and exercising, I felt better than I ever had. He was very, very nervous about me coming off medication, but I said, it's my choice. So that was probably over 5 years ago now that I decided to do that. And I've been stable ever since. So I have an MRI, I still go back to a different neurologist. And she sends me off for an MRI every 6 months. And every time I get that letter, every single time it comes in the mail and it says stable disease activity, which means, and it always says no new lesions. So no change, basically. I still have lesions. So lesions are like scars in the brain. One of them faded though. And I was like, yes, can the rest of them fade, please?
You never know.
Yeah, that's right. There's always hope. But I still have a few lesions, but they're not active. So I don't have any symptoms. And I'm feeling really well. Like seriously feel better than I did in my 20s. So.
Yeah, I've noticed that too. Just the amount of things you can do and how much more energy you have. You don't get tired as easily. Don't rely on stimulants anymore. All of these things which you kind of, had to have my coffee or my, Red Bull or something like that. Which,
I used to live on coffee. I loved coffee and I still love the smell of it. I absolutely love it. It's one of those things that's such a comfort. And when I wasn't sleeping with my 2-year-old, I would have more coffee during the day, and then I wasn't sleeping at night because I was having too much coffee and he wasn't sleeping. So it was like, it was this double-edged sword. although I love the taste of it, but I would have it with milk, like I'd have a big double shot, large coffee with milk, and, it's a massive amount of calories, and we know everything else that's in milk that's not great. So I actually gave up coffee. I went on an Overcoming MS retreat. So they're running them at the Gawler Foundation, which is now called, I think, the Yarra Valley Living Centre. It's been taken over by a different organisation, and it was life-changing. I went along to this retreat and I met all these other people with MS, hadn't met anybody else yet. And we talked about the evidence. They talked about medication, the different things that were on the market at the time. The food was incredible, all completely catered for us. And the meditation, I had never meditated a day in my life before I went there. And I was a big skeptic, the science background. I always had this, in the back of my mind, okay, you're a scientist, you got to find the evidence. Always skeptical about everything. And I went in for the meditations and I was just blown away. And I still do it today. Every morning I have this practice. I get up really early while the house is quiet, before the kids get up, and I do my meditations. Not a long time, but it just resets me for the day.
Yeah, we do it every night before the kids, after they go to sleep. We just sit there for 10, 15 minutes in silence, and it's just calms you down, it's just a really peaceful experience. I love it. That's something that, sorry, you carry on.
Oh, sorry, I was just gonna say I love it. I do it early in the morning. I try and get up before the birds, but I meditate through them waking up. So I live in a part of the Adelaide Hills where we have just birds everywhere, and it's just really nice. And different times of the year there are different birds, and I just listen to them, and it's fantastic. I don't think I'll ever give that up, And
that actually leads us on to a very interesting point, because with the work we do with our clients and with IBD, and a lot of these autoimmune conditions, they have a very similar kind of initial cause. And the interesting thing is something you just mentioned, we're talking about meditation, the mindset aspect of healing, because a lot of people are so focused only on diet that they miss out on the fact that there are other lifestyle I guess areas where you have to also pay attention to if you want to heal your body, and the mindset is quite a critical one. Did you find that you were shifting mindset and finding ways to reduce stress as you went through your healing journey?
Yeah, definitely. I never realized how much stress played a role in MS, but I had an amazing example, maybe about a year after I'd started on the program and changed my diet and started meditating. My son, who's probably about 3, had a massive tantrum, like they do. It was about something simple, like his sock wasn't on right or something. And it went for about half an hour, and he just carried on. I just, in my mind, I always used to repeat to myself, infinite patience, because he's only little, And it was really strange. I could feel the stress starting to rise in my chest, and my vision became funny again. It was like, wow, that the inflammation from the stress was making my optic nerve, which was probably, and it still is scarred, but it works perfectly fine now. It was making it inflamed again. And my vision, I was losing that color and some vision loss. And I just thought, wow, this is really interesting. So it was like, a perfect example of how, life still throws things at me all the time. And we all get stressed, but it's just the consistency. I think that, you don't need to meditate your head off. You don't need to, although I would love to go on a silent retreat where you're meditating all day. It'd be fantastic. It's just that. And it comes into your daily practice. So if somebody's having issues and they're upset about something, it just shifts your mindset. Let's think about this a different way. And I've actually started meditating with my son. So he's 9. And we lay in bed every night and we have an app and we listen to some music. And sometimes he says, Mum, let's listen to the rain. So we'll put on some rain. And it's just that time together, but to be still and then go to sleep that way. So,
that's wonderful.
It's been amazing.
And to give the children the opportunity to kind of experience this kind of awareness at such a young age, that we didn't get till our 30s or 40s. It's quite a kind of profound thing. Absolutely.
Yeah.
Okay, so
Yeah.
in terms of, you know, as you got better and you started to find out more, obviously I know you're doing a lot of interesting work around, you know, plant-based diets, and you've got a wonderful Instagram page with lots of interesting recipes on it, and we're going to share all the details of where you can find Rebecca's work in the description. So if you want to find out more about what she's up to and what she's doing, please go down there and follow her, because some of those recipes, yum. So you know, just talk about what kind of maybe inspired you to start to want to share your story and your experience with other people.
Yeah, sure. So once I started, it took a little while to work out how to cook again. So I cook the standard Australian way. Everybody teaches you. You make a cake, you start with butter and eggs and sugar, and you beat those and you add the flour and whatever. And that's how I made cake. So it was like really heavy in fat and sugar and whatever. And then also to start any kind of savory dish, you chop the onions, you put a whole lot of olive oil in the bottom because olive oil is great, you know, Mediterranean diet and everything. You stir it up, you add your meat. You had to let that, you know, cook for like 4 hours. I think we used to cook curries to make the meat tender. You know, and then it was always that thought process around what's in the freezer? What do I need to get out to defrost? So changing the way I cooked took a little bit of while. So, but then I started to develop these recipes that I was loving. Like, I don't think I've loved food as much as I have in my whole life. And also the fantastic thing about it is it's low calorie density. So you get to eat massive volumes, you know. You know, my salad bowl at lunchtime is like a serving bowl. It's just enormous. And I just love that feeling of feeling full, but then, you know, you can go to bed with a full stomach and the next morning you wake up and it's completely gone. So that is very, very, very satisfying. And the other thing I probably should mention too is that, so my husband's also a scientist and he was very, very skeptical. For me, he could see the benefits. But I said, well, maybe the rest of the family should be starting to eat more like this, because the kids had a slightly higher genetic predisposition to developing MS than the average person. So not hugely, but, you know, if we could reduce their risk, why not? Because I really think that if I knew what I know now, I wouldn't have developed MS. So if my parents knew, I mean, you know, hindsight, and I don't want to blame them at all, but, you know, and it's like every other condition. If you could go back in time, if I could go back, 10 years, potentially I wouldn't have developed. But then I wouldn't be where I am now. So
exactly.
It's all part of the journey. But I actually at a point where I'm very grateful for the diagnosis, because I wouldn't have made these changes. I wouldn't be on the journey I'm on now. So
Shamiz feels exactly the same. You know, what he went through is a big part of his character now.
Yeah, it changes who you are, and definitely changed the course of my life. So the kids and my husband are totally on board now. I sat down with him. We watched a few documentaries. I got him to read the Overcoming MS book. I looked at the science. He went off independently and looked at a few things as well. And we were worried about the kids, that they wouldn't be getting, you know, calcium, iron, omega-3s, whatever. But we took the plunge. And so I think about 12 months after I changed my diet, they came on board. My kids are ethical vegans now too. Like, you know, they love animals so much that they wouldn't ever want to eat them. And I did ask them recently, you know, when you go out of home and you've got your own money, will you just go and buy a meat lover's pizza? And they're like, oh, yuck, no way. That's disgusting. You know, because you always wonder if like they'd go and test things. But they can't ever imagine eating that sort of food. And they're not deprived. They get to eat so much delicious stuff. So it's really good that the whole house is completely on board now. But I guess, so what I wanted to do was I was creating these meals. I was absolutely loving them. I just started, you know, grabbing my phone and taking a few pictures and posting them on Instagram, and created my my Instagram page, I think initially, and a website called Just Eat Plants. I was actually in a supermarket one day in a car park, and there was a woman, she was struggling. She was so overweight, and you could just see on her face, you know, sometimes you just catch people's expression. She was in so much discomfort. And I just thought to myself, just eat plants. It's so easy, just eat plants. And, you know, you can't say that to people, but you just so wish you could help them. I started my Facebook and Instagram and my webpage. And I just wanted to share with people how amazing and colourful and delicious these things were. And I guess it was, if I could have had that information when I was first diagnosed, it would have given me hope. And that's what, I wanted to do, was just to inspire a little bit of hope. Not that everybody with MS is off medication, or not that everybody with MS lives without symptoms. Some of them don't. They can have scarring in their brain that's lifelong. So they'll have deficits that will live with them for a long time. But it's about halting the progression of the disease the best you can using every possible means. And I just wanted to provide a little bit of hope. So hopefully I'm doing that.
Yeah, and it's never the wrong time to choose a healthier option, is it? I mean, even if you don't have, even if the damage is there to the point where it may not be able to be fully reversed, it's still going to improve your quality of life. And, if you're going from like 20% even to 80%, surely that's a step you'd want to take, even if you don't quite get to 100%, so much better. And
even if it's just reversing things like chronic constipation, I think Corinne Nidja talks about that. If it just reverses your constipation, isn't that fantastic? To feel regular and have more energy. For me, I noticed lots of other little things. Like I always had really itchy scalp and dry skin and just things like little itchy patches, like little bits of eczema and stuff. That all just completely went away. I also lost a lot of weight. So I think I was 22 kilograms heavier than what I am now. That was post-baby as well. But since changing my diet, that's how much. And it's just stayed off. For me to put on weight, and I can, because, you can eat some calorie-dense foods on a plant-based diet. I need to eat a lot, though. Like I need to seriously overeat to start putting on weight. So, that's one of the great side effects. You end up an ideal weight. And my ideal weight, I calculated it a little bit from Dr. Furman has a bit of a weight calculator in one of his books, and it's actually much lower than, the scale that says this is a healthy weight range. So for me, I could be, 10, 15 kilos heavier than I am now. I'm still within that healthy weight range. But actually, we should all be a little bit leaner than that, because I think that's based on the average population.
Yeah, absolutely. I think most people who go on a whole food plant-based diet and they actually follow the principles and eat caloric sufficiency without overdoing it, they do end up just normalizing as the body just gets rid of excesses that it doesn't need to hold on to anymore. And toxic stuff and fat and all that rubbish that we've been exposing ourselves to over the years and the years. So, and you also do, really fascinated with some of the other work you've been doing with your cooking classes. And am I correct? You're a Food for Life accredited?
Not Food for Life, but I've done the eCornell plant-based.
eCornell, that's the one that you've done.
Yeah. And I'm actually I'm currently studying nutrition as well. I've had a lot of people approach me and say, can you develop a meal plan for me? It's like, well, no, I'm not qualified, but in a little bit of time, I will be qualified to do that sort of thing too. And it was more about just giving me just that little bit more credibility, I think. So I guess what I do is I consider myself someone who likes to educate people about food. So I do, at the moment, I'm doing online cooking classes because, we all are wanting to stay more at home. And I've got one coming up. I'm not sure when this will air, but I've got one coming up on fermentation. So I'm doing a workshop on creating sauerkraut and kimchi and soy yogurt and all those things that sound really difficult, but they are so easy. So they've been really, really great. And I'm getting a lot of positive feedback. I do face-to-face cooking classes too. So quite often I'll go into people's homes. I'll bring everything we need. And they just want a little bit of inspiration. They might be plant-based already or wanting to change. And so, well, how do I cook this way? So we have a great time, prepare all this food, and then I just leave them with a massive feast. So that's been really fun. I developed an ebook as well, which I've got on my website, just all the recipes that, some of them I've been sharing, but some of them I've, thought people just need to know how to do this sort of thing. So that was really good. And yeah, a few private cooking classes too. I've had some as far away as Canada. So we'll Zoom in together, we'll cook together, but there's always like, I always leave enough time for conversation. So, you know, a lot of people with MS will, you know, sort of want to chat about what else can I do? You know, what do you eat in a day? What does it look like? And, you know, that sort of stuff.
I think it's so important to teach people the practicalities of, you know, relearning how to cook. You know, as you said, you know, you're used to or been exposed to a specific way of doing things, and everyone just thinks, okay, that's the way it's done, and it can't be done a different way. But it can, and you just have to find the substitutes and the different approaches to making it work for you. And you know, so if you can have someone who's already been there and done that and gone through that experience, who can show you, okay, well, here's how you cook food without oil, you know, this is how you can do a stir fry, or this is how, you know, you don't actually need all those unhealthy ingredients to make your food. First of all, make it, but secondly, it still tastes just as good, because oil doesn't really have flavor anyway. So that's fantastic.
Yeah, and I do like to educate people about the calorie density of, you know, oil, animal products, vegetables. So one of the other things I do is workplace wellbeing seminars. So I've been into a number of workplaces, and I'll teach them about the benefits of plant-based diet, tell them my story. Sometimes I'll do a cooking demo as part of it, and they get to taste some of the food. But I always like to bring along my jars. I have the 1 litre jars, which sort of shows the volume of the human stomach. I've got one with olive oil, and seriously, the bottom of the jar, that's a tiny little bit of olive oil, and that's 500 calories. And then I've got you know, some fake meat that I think was in a kids' play kitchen set. I've got like this much in a jar, and that's 500 calories. And then I've got one of like rice and beans, and then I've got one that I do of fresh veggies. So I do like, I slice up like a rainbow assortment of vegetables, and I can't even fit 500 calories in that. So it's such a fantastic visual representation to pull out these jars and say, you know, what do you want to eat?
Yeah.
Do you want to fill your stomach or overeat? And yeah, it's fantastic. And usually, like, people are just sold with that. I do find, so my audience is a lot of women. For some reason, women are more inclined to listen to, you know, wanting to change their health. And I usually get a few men in the crowd who are just sitting there, you know, been dragged along to this. One man did not make eye contact with me once. I did a cooking demonstration at the vegan festival, and he sat there in the corner with his arms crossed, and I talked directly to him for most of it. And he just looked off to the side. And I think somebody asked me a question about coconut and coconut milk. Well, that's vegan. Why can't I eat that? And I said, well, it's massively calorie dense. If you can climb that coconut tree and get the coconut and bring it down, take the husk off, you know, get it out of its shell, process that meat to make coconut milk, you've probably burnt enough calories to eat it. Still wouldn't recommend it because it's so high in saturated fat, but, you know, getting a can and just putting it in your dish is not very health promoting. And the topic of erectile dysfunction did come up somehow during the cooking demonstration. And that man, then I could see he went, oh, it's like, wow, maybe I touched on a nerve there. But yeah, it's very interesting, people's reactions.
Yeah, no, that's amazing. Now, as we kind of wrap up the session, I always like to ask people who've been through something like what you've been through to share learnings and advice that they would give someone, you know, who's in a similar situation, sitting there watching this or listening to on the podcast. You know, what are some of the things you wish you had known or had understood when you were going through your journey?
Yeah, I think definitely that there's hope, that it's not as grim, that the diagnosis of multiple sclerosis is horrible, but it doesn't have to be. You can do so much to change the progression of the disease, and it's amazing. You know, it's been such an amazing turnaround for me in so many different ways. And yeah, I just want them to know that. And it doesn't have to change overnight. You know, I mean, I did lots of changes very quickly because I think fear is a massive, massive motivator. But yeah, it doesn't have to happen that quickly. Just make as many changes as you can, particularly things like dairy. You know, dairy has this, there's a particular protein in dairy that mimics the myelin in our brains and spinal cord. That's what our immune system then thinks, oh, I recognize this as foreign, I'm going to start attacking the myelin. So removing things like that, and so many substitutes out there. So, you know, I mean, I've refined it to the point where I guess I don't need the substitutes for cheese and milk. I'm enjoying what I eat so much that I don't need to do that sort of stuff. So, you know, if you want a substitute to start with and then bring in, you know, more of the whole foods, it doesn't have to happen that quickly. But it also depends on how well do you want to be. I had somebody ask me recently, oh, you know, well, what if I have a cheat day once a week? Do you ever have cheat days? I thought, well, I want to walk, you know, I don't want to be in a wheelchair. So how well do you really want to be, you know? So, yeah, it can be fun. But one of the other things that has changed quite recently is that I'm also working for Doctors for Nutrition now. So I'm helping them, which is fantastic because I've been friends with Helene, one of the founders of Doctors for Nutrition, for a long time. And yeah, I've volunteered for a lot of their different events, and I'm finally working with them. So I get to, you know, have a little bit more of a platform to be able to sort of share this information. So
yeah, and if you don't know about Doctors for Nutrition, they're a charity, aren't they? They're a charity organization here in Australia that is made up of people who are very passionate about whole food, plant-based nutrition, and they're trying to teach the medical profession about the benefits of plant-based nutrition, as well as the public, obviously. And also they're doing really cool things. Medical students. Yeah,
targeting medical students as well, trying to get them the information. And a lot of medical students are passionate about sustainability. So we actually have a webinar coming up soon, one of our Food Vitals webinar, that's going to focus on sustainability and health and how those two are interlinked. Because, yes, so many people that are becoming more aware of not, you know, like medical student, how many of them are actually diagnosed with something? Probably a very small number because they're still young, but they're passionate about the environment. So, yeah. It's incredible.
And that's a really cool thing, because everyone gets into the medical field because they want to try and help and make a difference and change, you know. And then what tends to happen is I speak to a lot of doctors and they feel like they're not empowered to help people improve their health, and they feel like they're just writing out medical scripts and things like that. But if we start to teach them at a younger age, before they actually get out into the world of medicine, that, hey, look, these are all the possibilities, and hopefully we can start to get changes happening from the ground up.
And you know, even if they don't make changes themselves, they might come across their first patient with diabetes who's, you know, losing their feet because of poor circulation or whatever, and it might just think, oh, hang on, I did hear something about that, you know. So it's sort of planting the seed. But yeah, it's hopefully going to impact a lot of people. I know that medical students don't get much training. I think it's an elective in Australia too, so you can actually go through your medical degree and not be exposed to it. And when it's 70% of health conditions that come in through a GP's office are potentially food and lifestyle related, maybe that definitely needs to change.
Yeah, absolutely. All right, so look, thank you so much for joining me. It's been a very insightful chat, and you know, the reason that we want to share these amazing stories is to give people who are watching and listening to this, you know, hope that you can improve your condition. It's not a life sentence when your doctor tells you you've got a, you know, lifestyle or chronic disease that you're going to have to be taking medications for the rest of your life. And then, you know, over time, you're progressively going to get worse until eventually, you know, you're not going to be able to function very well. So, people can take control of their own health, and we don't have to rely on drugs and treatments and pills and things like that. There's obviously place for them when necessary, but I think overall the long-term solution is the lifestyle, the diet and the lifestyle, and making those changes. And look at the change that Rebecca's had in her life. You know, where she could have been, you might not be able to see, or you might be colorblind at this point in your life.
Yeah, no, I think
and
it
you're
would have
not.
progressed to, pretty bad vision loss.
Hmm.
Yeah.
Yeah. So, is the hamburger worth it? Is that food worth it? When you actually look at stories like this, where you're choosing between what you eat and other lifestyle factors, and literally not being able to function as a human. So, if and if you don't have any conditions right now, like the one thing that I'm sure you're very passionate about as well is prevention, right? We're super passionate about that because we don't want people to have to experience the things that Shamiz went through when he was trying to heal and recover. And obviously you would have gone through withdrawals of toxins and drugs and things like that as your body healed and got better. And that's not really an easy process. So if you can avoid having to deal with that and go through those difficult situations, why wouldn't you?
Yeah, I always say that it's easier to prevent rather than reverse the chronic illness. So, but it's difficult because they don't have that fear as motivation. They need to find their own motivation for change. So yeah, the fear of being in a wheelchair and my children were a massive motivator for me. So
and that's why sharing your story, hopefully, like maybe it probably won't click with every single person who listens to it, but if someone says, well, gee, I'd prefer not to be in that situation, maybe I'll make some changes. I may not make all the changes that we would necessarily recommend, but it's going to help them. Every step makes a difference.
Yeah, definitely. Yeah, and I'm always happy to talk to people too. I have people from all over the world just emailing me saying, oh, I've heard your story and I've made these changes, and they might have questions about different things. I'm happy to talk to anyone. So
wonderful. Well, if you do have MS or you want to improve your health or you want some help with cooking and things, reach out to Rebecca. She's and have a look at her social media pages and her website as well.
I just posted a recipe today. It was about it's a banana waffle recipe, so very low fat, whole food, plant-based, and delicious. Yeah,
sounds good. All right, so again, thank you so much for joining me today, and for everyone who's watching or listening on the podcast, I hope you got some hope and inspiration from Rebecca's story that you can take control of your own health and overcome even some of the most serious conditions that we know of. So congratulations on what you've been able to achieve, and thank you for sharing and educating other people as well about how they can change their lives. We really, really appreciate that. Now, if you are listening to this on the podcast, please share it and follow the podcast so you get to see or listen to some incredible stories that we've got coming up. We also would love you, if you're watching on YouTube, to subscribe to the channel and click on that little bell notification icon to get notified of all our upcoming videos, and also give Rebecca a like. And if you have any questions, there's a comment section down there. So, I'm sure Rebecca will check the video, and we'll also be answering any questions that people have. If you want to know more about multiple sclerosis or how the body heals, or just plant-based nutrition, please ask down below. Apart from that, thank you so much again, Rebecca. For everyone who's listening and watching, make sure you eat plants and lots of them. Take care, everyone.